So thanks, Fiona. So the first question in my head when it all happened was, can an exec coach really help at a time like this? I'm not a therapist. I became anxious about my own skills. I'm quite used to pushing people, to being hard about objectives and where are they going to stretch themselves next, and etc., etc. Now, I hopefully do that in a good rapport whilst looking after people's emotional health and the rest of it. But nevertheless, that my approach is around challenging people to perform. So that was a concern. And the other concern was to question my motives as well. Why was I doing it? Was I somehow missing out on something? I'm an ex-NHS manager. I could be in there doing something. Was it to give me purpose? Suddenly I've got nothing in my diary. My diary is usually chocked. Was I missing a sense of purpose myself? I was really interested in what my internal motive was to do it. Not that that was problematic, but it could have been if I didn't understand it. I didn't want to fall into the classic rescue bit. I've got to do myself to rescue bit, or get excited by the crisis, which was one of my observations of some of the people that I was working with. There was an element of excitement around crisis. But I did choose to go ahead of it, and then it was kind of, what do I do? So Fiona, if I just do that, I'm used to all kinds of coaching models that, but essentially I'm working with people in corporate positions. I'm used to talking about leadership development and again, Fiona, just how by exploring what kind of corporate leadership and personal leadership people are looking for, the developmental conversations about what that means for them. That was my bag, and I realized fairly quickly that this wasn't the case. And it started with a conversation from the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management, who I was at the time running a program with for medical directors from across the country, and their leadership. And obviously they weren't able to get together as easy. And what was the offer? And we were getting some messages, especially from newly appointed medical directors, that times were tough out there and this was really stretching people. Thanks, Fiona. So it was through conversations with them that we came up with this idea of, and people were saying all kinds of things to me. Well, they'll be burning out, so we need some burnout coaching. We were really conscious about, one is the assumptions we make about what people might need coaching for. But the other thing was labeling it before they realized what we wanted for. And I remember having a chat with Peter Lees, the chief exec there, and he said to me, what do you really want to do, Dave? And he said, here's the click, Fiona. I remember saying to him, I just want to create a safe space. I don't want to give it a fancy or contrived name. And there was the fancy contrived name as we were speaking. It was just some safe space conversations. And we put a communication out, and it was based around a model that we very quickly developed through discussion. Now, I developed a model for 3 reasons, because it didn't need a model. We weren't trying to be clever or academic or write a new book, but I wanted it to help us define what it was we were doing. I wanted it primarily to help the clients we were working with who were saying, well, what's this for? To give them some idea as to what we were working with. And the third reason was it was really clear to make it for us to say what it's not about as well. So what a model does is say this is not about this. So the model we came up with, and ready to click away Fiona here, I think, because it's all animated, was PPR, which stood for proactive, protective, and reflective. That right now, are there some proactive, practical discussions that people need to have around stuff that's right in front of them, right in their face, that they need to explore? And they just want some time out of the busy day just to say, I'm faced with this issue. Or was there some stuff around how they were looking after themselves, how they were looking after their physical health, their mental health, were they true to their values? And the third one was really interesting, because the third one was the reflective bit. And what became really apparent really quickly is knowing when to ask reflective questions and when to stay quiet. Because when people are living with an issue right there, and as a coach you ask what might be a brilliant question outside of this time, such as, tell me what you're learning about yourself, the danger is if they were sat in front of you, you lose an eye, because they're in the thick of a very stressful situation. And we became quite adept or in the last few weeks, we've become quite adept. There's a group of us talking to each other at talking about judging when to ask a really great reflective question and when not to. And I've been working. I work as part of a global leadership development team. So I've got used to Skype and all kinds of things over recent years, but I'm much more relying on my eyes to look at people's faces. I'm much more dependent on my ears, really listening really hard for those intonations in the voice that somehow when I'm sat in front of somebody seems much easier. So it is harder, it is tiring. And the hardest way, if I listen with my eyes and I listen with my ears, I also listen with my tummy. And getting that sense of who you're talking to is much harder on screen, and takes much more in-depth much more in-depth concentration. I feel that's been my experience. Thanks, Fiona. So I'm waffling through this because I just want the opportunity to engage with people and ask questions. But very quickly, the proactive bit, some practical safe space where people can talk through something that's addressing them, those open, immediate challenges and concerns of the day. Something in my coaching practice I never usually go towards. No, wouldn't usually get involved with things like that. Somewhere to share and compare practical plans and strategies, because what I found myself doing, again, which is different to my normal coaching practice, is if I've spoken to a chief exec one day and then another one the next day, I don't disclose who I've been talking to, but I say, I can tell you what others are doing at the moment if that's helpful. That I feel as a coach, I'm having to offer gifts and knowledge, and that somehow I'm not doing my job purposefully if I'm not. Now, usually my centered coaching is that what I would not do is go there. But one, I've got limited time. And also, if I do think that there's something that somebody else is doing that they might find useful, I'm somehow not being the best coach by keeping that to myself. And the other bit is around exploring, test, propose new ways of working and emerging practice. There's been so much emerging practice and anxieties that come with that. I mean, working from home, just one of those. When will we learn as a service to be more focused on outcomes and not inputs? Why are we still measuring that people are sat at the phone at 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock instead of are they achieving the very best quality work they can do whenever they do it? It's fascinating. And that's been much about encouraging people to let go of things as it has been pick up new things. The protective stuff, is just that space to provide a cathartic space where people just go, blah, judgment free. I'm not talking to anybody else. Say what you like, as professionally or unprofessionally as you like. If it needs to come out, just let it out. The bit about the psychological support, that I get really anxious that I'm not a therapist, and I realise that what I'm not. I never try to be, and I'm not. If I recognise that somebody needs more help than I can offer, then it's challenging them or supporting them to discover where they could seek that out themselves. But I do recognise, having coached for so long now, that people do get a therapeutic value from coaching. I've always recognised that, but I think there's a difference between recognising people get a therapeutic value from it and setting out to do therapy. And the final bit, especially for people working at exec level, is to protect the values of the constitution of the NHS and other declared organisations, because I've done this across systems, which has been quite powerful. I mean, I won't name and shame people, but as ever in crisis, we see the very best of behaviours come out and the very worst of behaviours. And quite frankly, there's been some appalling behaviours that I have become aware of from organisations that I know have invested so much in leadership development in recent years. I wonder how well that's been invested or deployed, or that it's clearly not turned into behaviours. But some of that's for later discussion. I feel it's probably not helpful now. It's why I've remained free of social media of recent weeks. And the reflective piece, this is the bit around the timing of it, is just that time for them to look at their own leadership behaviours, the organisational leadership behaviours, and capture any of those insights, especially into working in complexity and what sense people are making in of complexity, and also, what's good to capture for future learning. So I've whittled through that. I've got 1 more minute just to summarise my learnings, and I'm going to leave you with a reading book that I asked a reading list that I let people to do. That I'm going to skip. Well, should I give you some headlines? Go on, I'll do it. Go on, I'll go straight on. I'm conscious of time. So these are some of the things I noticed. I'll build the answers into this. Go on, Fiona. Question your own motives. I had to question my own motives. Keep going. People are ready when they're ready. So there was I was being encouraged to push and email out again and email out again. People came back to me when they were ready. The offer was there. I'll just spend a minute on this. Don't make assumptions, because this links into some of the themes. Don't make assumptions as to what people want to talk about. I have had chats with people that have been distressed because of the amount of stress. I've had chats with people who, because they felt guilty because they're not doing their bit. I've had chats with people who felt guilty because they're enjoying it and will miss it when it stops. Lots and lots of things that, from my perspective, I never considered. I had chats with medics who were embarrassed about people applauding on Thursday, because actually this has been the quietest time in their career so far. And when the neighbours were shouting, one medic, when the neighbours were shouting his name out across the road to him and started chanting his name, he burst into tears. And he thought that's because people thought he was upset. He was totally embarrassed because he doesn't feel he's doing his bit. Other people, they found themselves with downtime they'd never really had before at the minute. A lot of the crisis planning is done. A lot of people I've had career development conversations. And they've still felt the need to do that. Some people have just wanted time to think and said, I don't really know what I want coaching for. But then what's happened is, as ever, when that's said, there's been a range of issues come out. Some people want to talk about, are they really flexing their leadership style? Or I found myself being more autocratic of recent days, and I feel guilty about that. And there is a need sometimes for command and control, but command and control can still be done with compassion. It doesn't have to be done with the long arm and big sticks. Thanks, Fiona. So that language of leadership was really important, and I've always been really important about it, but the words I use really matter, that I'm not leading anywhere. I heard you talking before about decompression coaching. It absolutely might be for some people, and it might not be for others. And could it restrict some people from doing it? Because the other thing is, we still have a very masculine, macho culture in the NHS, in my opinion, and a lot of people wouldn't drop their guard and say that they needed that. So that's just a little caution. Thanks, Fiona. I've been much more ready to share what other people are doing, any thoughts I might have or whatever, again, as I explained before. Been really interesting watch for the polarities of clarity and blinkers. And what I mean by that is that under pressure, I've been really impressed how senior people can clarify decisions that they need to make, get real clarity under pressure, and miss out some really obvious things. So there's this kind of dichotomy. There's two things about people that are getting real clarity and missing things out, almost in the same conversation. It's fascinating. Thanks, Fiona. Anxieties pop up in all guises. So this is the bit of it, whatever other people might call this in coaching, is people becoming quite anxious about little things at work. People that I've never known get anxious about X or Y, or I'm a bit worried that I upset this person or I did that. And of course, what I realised that sitting underneath that is they're worried about their kids or their mother or their grandma. It's actually anxieties in life that are popping up and being placed on. I mean, one person was telling me about the anxiety that was being caused rearranging one of the corporate offices. And what that corporate office had become was an outlet for anxiety. There was no doubt about that. But it was interesting. So it was just something that I discovered to watch out for. Thanks, Fiona. My personal inquiry boundaries have expanded. I take time now to say, how are you? How are your children? How's your family? And whatever. Now, I never neglected that, but it wasn't something that I majored on. But I realised that often the anxiety or the concerns may sit outside the workspace. So for me personally, it's not an area I go to. I found myself going more, and it's explained stuff to me. And finally, that timing of a good, critical, reflective question doesn't just need a good rapport with the person, it needs a good development rapport. So I learned to develop a parking lot. So I'm really interested what you've learned about yourself, but now isn't time. What is it you want to explore in 2 weeks' time or a month's time? What are you learning about your executive team around you that we would like to come back to? Because it's too real, it's too raw, it's right inside the face. There's the advantages to that is that people know it's being acknowledged. Whether they'll come back to it when they parked it or not, that's up to them. But it's being acknowledged as an issue to come back to, even if I'm not ready to talk about it now. Those are some of the highlights as to how my coaching have changed. Thank you very much. I'm going to take some questions because we've got very little time left.
Thanks, Dave. If you any questions in the chat box or direct to Dave, we've got a couple of 1 minute left, if that's okay, if anyone wants to ask any questions.
Everyone's blown away.
Yeah.
I've got a question, I think, Dave, if no one else is going to ask one. I'll take the opportunity as just chairing the meeting. I'll use my position there. Is, I suppose, from what you've been doing differently and what you've learned from this, what do you think you'll carry on taking with you as you on this learning journey?
I suspect there are some elements I might have to keep with me for a while, because I don't think this problem's going to go away for a while, and I don't think using this kind of technology is going. So there's a technical bit that I think will stay with me. I've got more used to it. There is the bit around volunteering information. I was quite a purist as a coach that would step back and challenge people. That at the right time and the right place. That's been quite beneficial to see people go, yeah, thanks for that. I hadn't thought of that. And you see them write it down. That's very different to my practice. I'm not saying I want to shift my entire practice, but I'll be less wary about using things like that in the future. I think the thing is, as long as I don't set out to, my coaching aim is to tell you what you need to do. I've got that wrong. But if something comes to my head, am I denying them something by not sharing it with them? It's just a thought.
Great, thank you so much. And if it's okay with you, if people continue to have questions, if we can pose them to you perhaps afterwards, if things come through on the chat box, or if they come to us more latterly, if we can send them over to you for a response.
My details are on that last slide there, so do call me, email me, and if I can help in any way, I will, but I'm no expert.
Thank you so much. And I think we've seen some great comments coming through as well about them, reassuring and elements that people can relate to, useful around those personal boundaries and all those things. So I think it's resonated with a lot of people on the call. I'm really conscious of time, and we try really hard not to run over for you, and appreciate others may well be going on to other calls. So if you have anything else you want to ask us, share with